In this lesson, we're going to look at scalability and costs in the cloud. Many of the things we're discussing here apply to any provider, not just AWS. The first thing to consider is that you're renting rather than buying your software and hardware. You're only using what you need when you need it, without purchasing costly hardware and software to serve an audience that may or may not show up. You're also going to think about buying rather than building. Oftentimes, you could rent a virtual server and then install a database or a queue on top of it. Many times, the provider themselves will give you access to a database or queuing service, which is often better to use. You're thinking operating expense rather than capital expenditure, so ongoing expense rather than one upfront payment. You also immediately acquire instant access to low-cost global infrastructure. You don't have to set up your own server farm in Asia or Europe. Probably the biggest benefit is that you're able to automatically grow and shrink your services with demand. Let's look at each one of these items one by one. First off, when you're thinking about renting rather than buying, you have to realize that you no longer own anything. Let's take a look at the non-cloud and cloud models for this. In the non-cloud model, you would sometimes have to buy literally a mountain of servers. You may even have to buy upwards of 10 to 20% extra servers and software licenses to accommodate growth that you expect. You also have to hire expensive and hard-to-retain IT folks who may or may not know what they're doing, and you may or may not find out until it's too late. In combination, this adds a lot of risk, cost, and distraction to your business. These core services that you need to provide are not the differentiators of your business, and you don't need to focus on them. Let's look what the cloud does instead. The cloud maps business needs, such as we need a server, we need a load balancer, we need a database or databases, we need storage, and most of all, we need it now. We may not know how fast we're growing, and we don't want to have to think about that. With a service such as Amazon Web Services, you simply pull up your kiosk and fire up a couple more servers or databases immediately on demand. The second thing you're going to think about is buying rather than building. If a service exists at your provider and you can deal with the limitations, that's the important part. Use it rather than building your own. This is why it's really important to understand the limitations of the services. Many times they are built for the biggest use case. You may have a need to build something that is not pre-built, in which case it would make sense to build your own. The services that the providers give you will oftentimes be dramatically lower cost and better performance to use the service. You can think of services such as queues, load balancers, managed database firewalls, and a wide swath of other services. Amazon is notorious for coming out with new services every month or week. You're also getting the benefit of doing OpEx rather than CapEx, which means that you will have variable monthly costs rather than yearly budgets. For example, if you're a retailer, you may see that you're spending a whole lot more on servers and services in November rather than December. This change can sometimes be more difficult for the organization than it is from a technical perspective. If this is the case with your business, you're going to have to look at migrating to a system such as OpEx, which will allow you to accommodate this. To get a big picture of your budget going forward, you could extrapolate out the first month's cost and look at how variable it is throughout the rest of the year. Another huge benefit you get by going to the cloud is instant access to low-cost global infrastructure. Amazon, for example, is able to get great pricing when they buy a huge amount of servers. They're able to also get really good cooling and power and bandwidth charges in each of these areas that they deploy to. You get the benefit of having access to a server farm in, say, Asia or Europe without having to set up a server farm and get those same pricing deals. Another huge benefit you get is automatic access to new infrastructure. For example, when Amazon added the AWS Sydney region, customers could start using that immediately. This also applies to services and service features. When Amazon comes out with a new service, such as Glacier, or a new feature, such as RRS in S3, you get immediate access to it without having to spend any development cost to actually build the thing. You just start using it and pay for it as a service as you normally would. Another great benefit of low-cost global infrastructure is access to near infinite scale. Let's say, for example, in this graph, that the left-hand axis represents your percentage of capacity. The unfortunate thing is, your iron or your data center may not have enough capacity to fulfill that at all times, in which case you max out your capacity and you're turning customers away for a period of time. With something like AWS, you have the ability to scale up or down as big or as little as you need, on demand, real time. A third benefit of instant access to low-cost global infrastructure is automatic access to new services and new features. For example, when Amazon announced DynamoDB on January 18th of 2012, customers could start using it immediately and just pay for that service fee. One of the biggest benefits of the cloud is the ability to automatically grow and shrink your services with demand. Let's actually again look at a usage curve. Let's say that the axis on the bottom is a 24-hour scale of how big and how little your demand gets. A typical web-based demand curve might look something like this. Demand starts growing at about 8 o'clock Eastern, and it starts trailing off in the afternoon. So you provision for extra capacity. You know pretty much what your graph looks like throughout the year, and you buy extra servers and possibly software licenses to accommodate that. With an auto-scaled application, you're constantly just keeping barely ahead of that curve. So you're possibly saving upwards of 70 or more % on unused capacity. Servers have a lot of hidden fees, such as cooling and bandwidth, that you pay regardless. And if they're not working, you're simply wasting money. This has been Scalability and Costs in the Cloud.